Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dan Benkin with the UNI Advanced Iowa program. We're excited to have you here with us today as we continue our exit planning series of topics. In past months, we've covered key employee compensation programs, kind of those golden handcuffs to keep key employees around as you go through a transition from one owner to the next. We've covered buy-sell agreements for multi-partner owned companies, how to execute on those. And we've also talked about financing a key employee, how oftentimes we think a key employee maybe isn't financeable, but through different loaning mechanisms, it's absolutely very possible to sell your company to a key employee or a group of them. And today we're talking with Lori Shaefer-Weaton, who I am excited to be here with today. She's a former chair of ABI and is currently the president and CEO of Agri-Plastics here in Fairfield, and has been graciously willing to give us a little time today to talk about her company and the transition that they have made from generation 1 to generation 2 within it. So today's topic is about family generational succession, which as a state, Iowa is full of generational companies, and at UNI we know what an integral role they play in our economy, and so we're as supportive as we can be to do things to help there. And so, Lori, we're excited to have you here with us today, and if we can get right into this maybe a little bit and have you talk a little bit about the company and how it was started.
Sure. So the company is Agri-Industrial Plastics, and we are located in Fairfield, Iowa, which you mentioned. And my dad started the company in June of 1978, so we're actually coming up on our 40th year, which is a pretty big deal for any company. Really excited to be part of that big anniversary, and we're taking advantage of that with all our employees. But typical entrepreneurial story. Dick is an engineer by background. He grew up in the plastics industry when it was very young. So was recruited went to Iowa, mechanical engineering, got recruited out to the East Coast, big companies like Monsanto. And really it was when plastics was just getting started. Certainly blow molding was very new. And he did things like converting glass pop bottles, glass aspirin bottles to plastic. Okay. So blow molding was really big in the packaging side of things, and has since gotten into a lot of other areas. But so he earned his stripes, if you will, but both my parents are from Iowa. So when they had the opportunity to get a little closer to home, they did that. And he came to work for a small company and start up a blow molding line in Bonaparte, Iowa, which very small town. Okay. 500 people nearby. Right. And so he moved us all back, and at that time that company happened to go bankrupt. So out of necessity, he didn't have a master plan of wanting to be, have his own company or nothing like that. He literally just wanted to eat and not move again to a big city. So he bought a used machine and begged, borrowed and did all sorts of things to get $10,000, as a loan, and second mortgaged our house. I mean, that great, again, entrepreneurial story. Yeah. And he started with 4 employees, 1 used machine, and 10,000 square feet of leased space. And today, 40 years later, we're 200 employees, 350,000 square feet, and we have 27 blow molding lines. So a bit of growth along the way, and pretty consistent over that 40 years, but the last 10, we've really accelerated our growth significantly. So we make, for those of you not familiar with blow molding is a plastics processing that makes hollow parts. So orange barrels that you see on the side of the highway, things like tabletops, pig feeders, just a whole array of products that we make, food storage containers, but we now specialize in fuel tank systems for non-automotive. So if it's a tractor or an ATV or a wave runner or portable marine tank, we're probably in that business. So we make 50% of our business is now fuel tank systems. Wow. Okay. So cool. That's who we are, a little bit of who we were and who we are today.
Sure. So he's guided the company for how long would you say then?
Yeah, so I would say he still guides through his presence as well as his principles and his values, which we've taken on as our corporate values. Certainly he never looked at himself that way, but we
Sure.
do as we continue to make decisions based on the framework that he really established.
Great.
So, but officially, I took the role of president in 2013.
Okay.
So,
Let's talk a little bit about that then. So you, up until 2013, I'm guessing, were doing other things. Maybe you could talk a little bit
I
about
was.
how your role progressed from wherever you started way back when, and
Yeah.
when that might have been when your dad drug you in here.
Yeah, so it's nothing about having a master plan. You know, when I was 12 years old, I wasn't thinking, man, I want to be that. You know, I want to be the next person in line or whatever. Like everybody's lives, we go different ways, but I was raised here in Fairfield, loved being Iowa girl, you know, small town, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
I went to school in Valparaiso, which is in Indiana,
Okay.
and day I graduated
You and I must
there.
have turned you down, evidently.
Maybe.
Okay. All right. That's okay.
I did apply there because
Okay.
I did end up being an accountant, ironically.
Oh.
Yeah, so you
okay.
and I would have made a lot of sense.
All right. Okay.
You're my backup. So
We'll
anyway.
edit that out. Okay.
So after going to school at Valparaiso, the day we graduated, we all moved to Chicago, as everyone does out
Sure.
there. And so I lived in Chicago for about 15 years around the city, but I had a great, went to work for a great company called Comdisco, a technology services company, completely different than manufacturing. Okay. Big on leasing. Back in the day, it was leasing mainframes, believe it or not. That's kind of old school, but I had a great career there that let me see a lot of different things, from accounting to finance to selling to I ended up in strategic planning. So it was a great background for me. And after about 10 years with that company, I chose to be a stay-at-home mom.
Okay.
And after about 5 years, I got the itch to go back to business and get back at work. And that was the first time we really had any conversations about, well, hey, maybe I could do something for Agra. And what I pitched was a sales territory in Chicago, of course.
So you didn't have to move.
Who wouldn't want that?
Sure.
And the answer was no. We don't need a salesperson. But what my dad heard, it's like the telephone game. Okay. Somehow all he heard was, wow, you want to come back?
Sure.
That's what I hear. So that's what I did a year later. And I became part of the team that he, you know, was kind of in process of being built at the time. I had a generic title of business development, so I could just get involved with whatever I wanted to, kind of. Okay. Company-wide projects, getting a ERP system installed, you know, building out the company, like physically, the facility plan. I just was involved in, of course, the finances.
So I'm guessing some of that you picked up from your previous roles.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of experience that you had before you came back here.
Yes.
And I was thinking maybe when you were a kid, were you ever sweeping
I
the floors?
was.
Or,
oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Running plastic around?
Yeah, you can't do anything at Agra without understanding what does happen out on the floor. That's really where it all comes together. And so actually I was part of the first assembly line in 1978. So
as a 4-year-old?
Yes, we'll go with that.
Okay.
There are obviously no child labor laws back then. And as was my mom was there, my brother. So that's a true story.
Okay.
Making baby pig feeders that we still make today.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So product's been around a while. And then in high school, I actually cleaned the bathrooms. And I did then in college. I worked actually the night shift so I could hang out at the beach all day. So that was my.
So you paid your dues.
I did. I have. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, that's great. And so then you mentioned your mom and a sibling. Mm-hmm. So is your sibling involved in the company, or?
So our family is involved. Certainly, my brother Brian, who lives in Nashville, Tennessee, he has his own PR company. So and has been down there for 30 plus years. Okay. No desire to be directly involved. Yep. But he does do some of our press releases, and we keep him involved that way. And also, obviously, he's a shareholder. Okay, sure. So he's very committed because he too grew up here. Mm-hmm. So he certainly realizes what Agra means to Fairfield. Yep. And he's very vested in its continued success. Like he certainly doesn't have a competing motive, which can exist every once in a while in a family. Yeah. But we're very fortunate that he's.
Sometimes the next blow molding shop opens up across the road, right? And
Yeah.
it's, former relatives and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so he's very supportive of the company and the community, even to this day.
Oh,
So
great. Okay.
yeah.
And so you've been involved for a while, but I'm guessing how long have you been
So
back?
I came back started in 05,
Okay.
but worked on some things kind of while I was closing down things in Chicago,
Yeah.
website and marketing and that sort of thing. And then so officially back here in Fairfield in 06.
Okay.
And then again, took over. We did not do the official transition until 2013.
Okay.
So it takes obviously a lot of time and planning and
Yeah.
attention to do it the right way. And so we use those years planning.
So from your own personal standpoint, for those generational families that we might have on today who are thinking, well, my kids have moved off to the coast or Chicago or wherever it might be, they're not going to want to come back. You know, what kind of thing would you say there? Because it sounds like you were in the same shoes of maybe Fairfield isn't where I'm going to end up coming back to either, but here we are.
Right. Well, I would say that never give up. You know, I think that we have so many great stories in Iowa of boomerang kids or boomerang adults, I guess you'd call them, who, you know, Chicago was a great city. I love living there. I love my time there. But if you grow up in small town Iowa and once you have kids, there's some real value of being close to grandparents and other family. And so some of those can trigger that connection. I would also say don't assume. Don't assume at any point in life that you know exactly even what your kids are thinking. I certainly don't pretend to know that now, and they're teenagers. So
that's a great point.
But you should never assume, and I think that's where some of these conversations about succession planning need to start early and often.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it helps to have a facilitator because they can ask the dumb questions in front of the family member who probably thinks they can answer it.
Yep.
But you might be surprised. So
okay. So in terms of your own plan here, and you talked about how you kind of started this transition about 5 years ago. Was it like a formalized plan, or how did things kind of evolve? Can you talk through a little bit of that?
Yeah, well, I would say the formalized part was when I came back, Agri never had a formalized business plan process at all.
Okay.
Because the planning was really in Dick's head. You know, he just kind of made the big decisions. Yep, we need another machine. He was talking to customers, so we knew what they needed.
Okay.
So the bigger you get and, you know, the more disciplined you get, I was very much about, what do you mean we don't have a business plan? Like, we need to do this. And I, again, because of my experience with another company, it was easy for me to step in and offer that value and to kind of facilitate that process. But part of business planning, one of the most important part, is looking at leadership transition, key people transition. You know, do we have a backup? When I first started here, I remember we had our warehouse manager had a heart attack, and we literally told customers, yeah, Jean's not here today, so we don't know where that is. Ooh. So not the best answer, right?
Sure, right.
So again, I mean, we've evolved quite a bit between systems and process and people, but I had to have that kind of formalized plan to say, okay, what are we working on outside of the day-to-day, and how are we developing our people?
Sure.
So that part of that was also me looking at what's my role, you know, what should it be, what do we need to do? You know, there's a lot of steps along the way, and I always tend to think that people on the outside, they hear succession planning and they immediately think, oh, how do we transfer the finance part? Sure. Well, that's the easy part. I mean, you'll have accountants and attorneys that can tell you how to do that all day long. Right. Whether it's a buyout.
You're talking about tax implications.
Right. I mean, yeah, it's
complicated. Financial transitions of a company. Yep.
But once you have set in mind those goals, it's kind of the easy part. The harder part is the emotional part, the family dynamic part. Right. It's just in the leadership part. I mean, just because I share his bloodline doesn't mean that I'm qualified to be president.
Sure.
Nothing about that means I'm qualified to be president. Or that
he's going to trust you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, you know, those years of 06 to 13 were about me building my own credibility within the group. So I came back as one of the team. And again, however you want to say it, I think it's important to earn your stripes outside of the company first so you have something to offer when you come back.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very important that you also earn your stripes inside the company. So I did not come in with this future president title by any means.
This wasn't your office when you got here?
No, I didn't have an office.
Okay.
In fact, the first 6 months I was in my dad's office, like at a little table in the corner.
Sure.
Yeah. It's
You told me to just shut your mouth and keep working?
It's a different concept of job shadow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and my company car was like a 1985 like Bronco.
Oh,
that
nice.
was falling apart.
Nice.
Yeah, it was great. So anyway, no, I did not start, but I do think that's really important. Manufacturing especially, you know, some of those stereotypes are alive and well. I mean, I'm coming in, I'm a girl.
Sure.
Shocker. And, you know, I'm not an engineer, I'm a finance girl. So, you know, I had to really make my, you know, understand what was going on the floor and find people that, again, could trust me. You know, if I go to her and ask her for, you know, we need this piece of equipment, what's she going to do? Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say, I don't know, do you need it?
Yeah.
So, yeah, you need that time to be part of the company. And so they can get to know you and you can get to know them. At least that's what worked for us. I mean, not everybody has that.
Yep. Did you have any kind of informal conversation at that point with your father, your brother, mother, or anybody else about, you know, I think I could run this show at some point in time? Or
it was kind of just an evolution, and
Okay.
I don't really remember, you know, that moment when we just knew that was the plan. But once we did know and I had identified that, and and a lot of that was when the senior management team, of which I was one, you know, we adjusted that so they were reporting to me.
Okay.
We made that adjustment a little bit prior to saying, okay, you know, she's president, and then had to communicate to the outside world. But the communication strategy is important. So you do need to talk within your family and your senior management team, and there's got to be a real tiered, you know, internal strategy, and then externally. What are you telling customers? What are you telling suppliers? What does this mean for them?
Right. How do you handle those conversations? Are you like proactive about that and getting out there and meeting with them as the two of you?
Absolutely.
Or?
You know, most of it was, again, they'd probably already been around me for some meeting, so it wasn't really a surprise, but we did do a lot of one-on-one communication.
Okay.
We sent out a, you know, formal letter saying, here's the deal.
Okay.
Dick's not going away. He's now chairman of the board. So we had communicating it is pretty important.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how did you kind of walk through that with employees too?
Yeah,
Especially
same way.
Key employees.
Yeah, so the same way. We had a very tiered kind of approach where we met. We didn't just put a memo out to employees. We met with them. We have quarterly meetings, so we took advantage of that in announcing it, and then followed it up with a memo.
Yep.
Because there were a couple other organizational changes. So.
And you were doing that well before maybe even you were taking over? Or how did, you know, were people already thinking, well, this is probably what's going to happen?
Yeah, I think people were thinking that. So prior to my coming back, so my dad just turned 81.
Okay.
And prior to me coming back, our OEMs were already starting to ask that question. Because, you know, some of the big guys have had trouble when a supplier, when there's one guy, and that one guy now is not there, you know, they no longer are able to supply.
Sure.
And that's a big deal for a John Deere or Kubota or whoever.
Yep.
And so we had been getting those questions.
Okay.
And so I think there was a huge sense of relief that we had a plan, that, you know, everything was going to transition. We weren't going to sell out. We weren't going to, you know, bring private equity in or, you know, whatever. I mean, again, a lot of those options are viable for a lot of companies.
Sure, yeah.
But in our case, we did proactively get the message out, and it was well received. And again, Dick was still here as chairman of the board, so that probably gave him some level of confidence as well. So.
Okay. And as far as like, kind of, maybe we could switch gears a little bit and talk about kind of how, so Dick founded this firm and it's now entering its 40th year. And so it's got its own kind of culture and norms and ways that, you know, people think of it as a firm from the outside world and from the inside. And you've been here for a while now to know those things, you know, so how integral is that? How is that being played out in terms of how is that part of things transition down from one generation of leadership to the next, do you think?
I think, again, I mentioned it early on, but you know, a lot of the values that Dick brought just inherently in how he did business.
Mm-hmm.
We, you know, 10 years ago or 12, however long ago it was, during the strategic planning process, you know, we pulled those values out and we said, okay, we need to all know what these values are, you know, integrity, customer satisfaction, teamwork. We made them more visible, and, you know, he just did it and didn't really know he was doing it.
Sure.
I would say that the culture has had to evolve a bit over time. I mean, when I first started, you know, you had the calendars in the shop, and I mean, you know, we had to change some things. We had to get a handbook and, you know, some HR things.
Sure.
So we did have to evolve, but the culture of we want to stay small, we want to be a family.
Mm-hmm.
Those good things we've battled to keep. I mean, and I think we've done a pretty good job, even though we've had to grow up. Big jump to go from 100 to 200.
Oh, yeah.
To have more structure. Things, again, I go back to IT systems. When I came in, there were still several typewriters around. I'm like, whoa, what do we use those for?
This was in 2000.
This was
something?
2006.
Yikes. Okay.
So, you know, we had to, you know, we've upgraded a lot of things in a lot of ways, and technology is a big piece of that, but you can still maintain that culture of taking care of one another, you know, jumping into problem solve, that sort of thing. Not getting too siloed, at the same time having to have some silos to get stuff done. So.
Yeah. Okay. And now in terms of, so this generational transition has been occurring for the last 4 or 5 years, however long it's been, in a more meaningful, formalized way. How has that impacted your father in terms of my sense of it? I know we have a couple people that are listening today that are in generational families where maybe generation one doesn't see themselves as simply tossing the keys to generation two and moving to Fort Myers and being done.
Yeah.
And they don't see themselves as completely leaving the business. And I think that's maybe part of what your father's exit looks. And how can you walk through that?
I do have a key.
Okay.
So I guess
you
I
have
got
a
that.
key,
I have a
not
key.
the key.
He still has a key too.
Okay.
So, you know what? I have such respect for the legacy side of things and for what he built. And again, we come at it from two very different skill sets. Again, he's an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
He loves going out there and solving problems today.
Okay.
And he, till the day he's no longer here, will be out on the plant floor solving problems.
Okay.
And I'm okay with that. That doesn't threaten me. That doesn't, you know, we're very careful. You know, when it comes to decision making, we have a very defined way of, he can't just say, yep, we're going to do that. Because, you know, everybody's like, well, Dick said. So he's very careful.
Because you learned the hard way, or because you could foresee, hey, we've got to communicate before we communicate to others?
I think that's where that ramp up time came in.
Okay.
Like, I saw if he said something, that was gospel. I mean, and you didn't even bring a different idea to the table.
Okay.
It was, well, Dick said that we're going to do this. And then that all, you know, everything else stops. And I'm like, well, listen, we can't do that anymore.
Yep.
We have to have a conversation. And he and I are very good about having conversations either prior to or after a meeting, but he is very careful not to overstep my authority to make decisions.
Okay.
But I am very open to hearing his opinions because I think it's valuable to have different perspectives. And I will say generationally, I don't know who's out there, but to me, there's an ease about being father-daughter that might not exist with father-son. And I might get some pushback for this, but stereotypically, father and sons might butt heads quicker.
Sure.
And again, I have an immense amount of respect for what Dick has done. He's a great, not only great engineer, but great business person. And I've learned a ton from him. And so I never came in thinking, I got it. I got this job. I got the title. I got the office. I'm good. I don't need him anymore.
Yeah.
You know, we all lead with what is the best thing for agro.
Okay.
Me getting a perspective from Dick on an engineering problem is not going to take me down the wrong path.
Sure.
So,
nor is it going to hurt your ego, it sounds like.
No, I mean, and I think that's, if you both come to the table with that, you know, mindset, it's going to go okay.
Okay. And so then you don't ever have to worry too much about what employees are thinking about, they're
No.
always going to hear kind of the same messaging.
Yes, we do not, and I'm not saying we're perfect. I mean, I'm sure you could talk to a couple who have gotten some different perspectives.
Sure.
But I think we do a pretty good job of that.
Okay.
He works on a lot of special projects, and again, as long as he wants to come in and help his favorite customers design the next product, I'm all in. I mean, good for him.
Yeah.
If I'm
and for the company,
80s and, it keeps me going, and he's not going to just stop one day and make furniture or, go to Florida.
Sit around and do stained glass windows.
No, but he has found a great balance of, he comes in fewer hours. He can go to the lake house for a longer weekend. So, there's been some balancing things, which is also good, on the family side.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
how do you think you and him mentally, decided, okay, this is the month, or this is the quarter, or this is the time when this title transition and, it's real type of thing? How did that come about? Was that part of a nicely thought out plan from 3 years back? We know we want to hit this mark. Or
no, I think it was more about, the company was growing to the point where we were getting ready to make some other organizational structure changes.
Okay.
Consolidate some things. When I first came back, he had 10 direct reports.
Okay.
Including the head of maintenance and the head of our setup team, who sets up our machines. And I said, well, they're probably not going to get a lot of benefit for reporting to me and sitting in meetings.
Right.
Yeah, they would go crazy. And they did. I tried that for a little while. And they're like, what? A meeting? I don't mean a meeting. So, I think the timing just kind of happened for us in the time we had gone through the planning. We knew financially what we're doing. We knew what the end goal was. And then it was more about kind of how our company was transitioning as a whole.
Okay.
That it made sense.
So there was some timing that was involved from that standpoint.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. But, for those folks that are on the call today with us, those company owners, if you could go back, do anything differently, it sounds like your approach was somewhat informal, but very much communicative, and a lot of proactive communication on both sides, and having the company's best interests at heart the entire time. But is there anything that, you think, boy, if we had done this maybe a little differently, or if I was in these people's shoes and they're just starting this transition, what kinds of things would you want to point out?
There were a couple key people that we maybe underestimated their emotional reaction to the announcement. And, I had a plan, right? Here are the meetings we're having today. Here's what we're going to do tomorrow. Here's what we're going to say. I mean, structured. And again, there were some people that I just completely underestimated how emotional, and I don't know, it was just, I was taken back by that.
So the human element of the transition from their standpoint?
And hard to predict how everyone's going to behave. I mean, I had people come up to say, this is great. We kind of were all wondering what was going to happen. We have a big manufacturing company across the street that has been in an ESOP.
Okay.
So, I'm sure there were some people wondering, why aren't we getting this started? Like, it seems kind of late. And so I would say that would be, really think through, again, who your key players are. And that doesn't just mean the formal leaders, but the informal leaders. For me, that's on the plant floor.
Okay.
And those were some that we kind of lumped into some pools that maybe we should have pulled out and done individually.
Okay.
Just because of their role, because of the years at Agra, because of their tie to Dick, whatever the case may be. Sure. So I may have underestimated that component of it.
Okay. And maybe I'll pause here too and mention that we're live, and so if you have questions, we'd love to take your questions. You can put those into our Q&A box at any time. I think we might have one, and I was going to try to bring that up here. And so maybe we'll go through this one real quick. What are some specific examples of things or activities you do to keep the small family feel you mentioned as your business has grown? So, you've got 200 employees, very large scale operation at this point. How do you keep that? We're just started out of our garage type of feel.
Yeah, that's a really good question. We do it very intentionally through things like, from day one, Dick provided health insurance for family at no cost to the employee.
Okay.
So in 1978, that might have been the norm.
Sure.
We still do it today. And that is a big proposition
Yeah.
given everything that's happened in healthcare.
Oh, sure.
But every time I go into a negotiation meeting for the next year, in the back of my head is, man, if I made this change to the people that have been here a while, that would be big. And so it's kind of that taking care of one another feel. We still have a good old-fashioned couples Christmas party, prime rib buffet,
Okay.
and it's now gotten to the point where it's 375 people, and it's, you can barely find a place in Fairfield to hold it.
Sure.
So we do things like that. And, really it's just about staying connected, still going out there, knowing who's working here, knowing their families. Our kids go to school together. We're at ball games together. At the end of the day, it's that whole, that classic phrase about they don't really want to know what you know until they know you care. And I try to live that way. I insist on it from my senior management team.
Yep.
I don't want to hire somebody who's just really good but doesn't leave his office or her office. We've got to stay connected. So those are a few ways that we do that. We do cookouts and tailgates and company picnics and all sorts of things.
How about legacy in the community, that piece of things? How do you interact with that now as a transitioning firm?
That is a big part of who we are. So I definitely recognize in a small town like Fairfield, there are some pillars, and we are definitely one of those. So whether it's building a new park and rec or convention center, or just supporting the arts, supporting our kids, connecting with the education system, being on boards. Again, I encourage not just myself, because you can't do it all with one person, but certainly we are very, very active in our community because we know the impact we have. Not just the livelihoods of the people that work here, but beyond that. And again, lead by example. So my dad, there's a reason I'm connected to ABI. He was on the ABI board before me. There's a reason I sat on our Economic Development Association for 10 years. He was on it before me. So a lot of those expectations of yourself have been passed down from your parents. And in this case, I think that's really a good thing. So a lot of the things that Dick started probably back in the 80s contributing to, I've continued that and will continue it, because I think we have a responsibility to do that for our community and our state. I mean, it goes beyond that.
Oh, sure. Can you talk a little bit about maybe the advice, either informal or formal, that you and your father have gotten over the years that was instrumental in your own transition, that you would want to share with those who are going to be going through this?
Yeah. So you mentioned that I'm very involved in ABI, past chair last year.
Yes.
But one of the huge values of ABI, and for anyone who doesn't know, it's the Iowa Association of Business and Industry. It started as the Manufacturers Association way back when, I don't know, 150 years ago. So the core base is still manufacturing companies, big, small. But the networking that I get when I go to, whether it's a board meeting or a conference or an educational event, is stellar. So I can call up a Mark Hanawalt, who we talked about, and he'll spend 2 hours. If I have a problem in my company and I need guidance, they'll spend as much time as you want. We're not competitors, but we're peers, and we all want the success of companies in Iowa. So that networking is huge. Along the way, that includes law firms like Brown Winnick. It includes access to Ron Cox at Cirrus, and you and I, and I mean all sorts of great resources. And you get to the point where you're Deb Durham, economic development. You get to the point where you're so close to these people, you can just pick up the phone and ask them a question, and they'll be happy to answer it. So we had great advice from attorneys. And in this mix, I would say that, there's the attorney side, there's the accountant side, and then there's the wealth management side. And again, you have to find somebody that's knowledgeable in all. or you need to have a team supporting the transition.
Sure.
And we had a really good team.
So they would get together with you as a group, I'm assuming?
Yeah, and just, cover, again, not just, here's a finance plan.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what about, have you talked to Brian, and, do you think this is okay? So I have a team of those people, and for me, I have met most of my providers for the company, for myself personally, through ABI.
Okay. And so you mentioned reaching out to someone like Mark as another peer business owner. Was there in a family generational business?
Yeah.
Are there things that you reach out to other family business owners with, and they share, oh yeah, my kid is, I don't know, they're lost, and I don't know if they're ever going to get it, type of thing. I mean, do you find that you can talk to other business owners and get some good advice?
Absolutely. And, we have a tendency to trust our own.
Mm-hmm.
So, especially in manufacturing, we feel like we're our own deal. And so,
we're different.
So I'm sure everybody feels that way in whatever industry they're in. But we do get to share a lot of best practices, no matter what the topic. And this just being one. Hiring and retaining right now is a huge challenge across the state of Iowa.
Yes.
Developing talent within, all related to leadership transition, huge topics. And some people do it really, really well. And you want to go see their place, and you want to see what they're doing. You want to see how they do it, talk to their people. People will open their doors for you. And that's what I love. I mean, again, we're not competing. I'm not going to another blow molder,
sure.
But I am going to another small company who has the same challenges that I have.
All right. We've got another question here from an ABI member, Jim Nally at BCC Advisors.
I know Jim.
So, Lori, did you have any outside consultants help lead you and your dad through this process? What have you done? What may have you done differently looking back at that transition? We've maybe talked a little bit about that, but do you have anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, so we did have several, different people helping us directly. We did a business valuation and all those good things. We did it in the downturn, which was really effective. So I highly recommend that as a step. The next downturn, value your company before you transition.
All right.
So we definitely had different
for
players.
The Generation 2s out there, I assume.
Yeah. So again, accountants, attorneys. And I actually, at the time, ABI had put on 2 very comprehensive succession planning events where they had their advisory committee members and they went through case studies, and I dragged my dad to 2 of these because they were so good and I learned so much. But the funniest part was every example that they would put up there, I'm like, okay, have you been talking to someone? These were real life examples.
Yep.
And so to see them, it was just like being, working through a school mathematic problem. And that was interesting to go through. And in fact, that was very early on. And that allowed my dad and I to have open dialogue on a lot of different questions that we might have had about one another.
Sure.
Well, do you want to keep stock till the day, you die, or, what do we need to do?
Yep.
And again, one of the things I would say is it made me realize not to assume.
Okay.
I was pretty happy, honestly, to kind of go along, and I didn't need to be the owner. I didn't need to be the majority owner. I really wasn't concerned about that until probably one of our financial advisors said, well, but if something, God forbid, happens to your parents, you better be prepared because you don't want that tax bill.
At a certain time frame, that age component of what should happen if something happens to him.
And you hate to, as a daughter, certainly that's not the way I want to think. Mm-hmm. But as an advisor, they have to point out, listen, you need a period of time to make these transitions. You do not want to be given a week or a month to do everything. Yep. That's just not going to be the most effective solution for anyone. So we definitely had some really good advisors. And again, I highly recommend that. They've seen it 100 times. You're going to live it once, maybe twice, I guess.
Maybe on the other side too.
If you go through it again. So I think there's a ton of value in working with people who have worked through this with other companies.
Sure. Okay. Let's see here. One other thing that maybe we could talk through is the generational leadership. Often when we work with generational companies, the founder or the current operating generation maybe has their people in certain spots, and they have great rapport with those people, and those people also often are aging along with that current generation of ownership. I don't know if that's been necessarily something that you've dealt with here with your company, but if it is, how have you, what kinds of things have you put in place to kind of know that we need to build up a next generation of leadership to help support the owner or the CEO?
Yeah, I would say that it would be hard. You would be hard pressed to find any company who hasn't gone through that. Again, when I came back, so the company was not yet 30 years old, but some of these people have been here almost that whole time.
Sure.
So some of them like their typewriters. So when I started talking about an ERP system,
sure,
basically,
who's this crazy lady from the city?
Yeah, what are you doing? And so, I think you're going to find that, and I think it's all in your approach on both sides. Again, Dick was always supportive. I just went to listen, I don't know how you're operating without a system where we're all in the same system.
Yeah.
Like one person was on one thing, and I'm like, I just don't get it. Like, I can't even start
comprehend that.
Right. Especially wanting to look at the numbers. So, he was on board with that plan. And so then it was up to me to, have those wins along the way with individuals to say, listen, it's going to be okay. It's going to be a change, but you're going to be fine. You're going to like this,
Change will be a good thing, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't always work. And you know what?
Sure.
There are some people that, may opt out. But once you've committed to a direction, whether that's, lean manufacturing or, again, I'd say an all-inclusive ERP system, you got to stay the course. So you'll have challenges.
Okay.
And you'll have some people that'll be like, well, that's not how Dick does it. And I'm like, yeah, I'm aware. Yep. So you'll have those conversations along the way.
All right.
For
you
sure.
just got to have this thick enough skin to deal with them. Know that generation one has your back.
Yeah, that, and in fact, that's the most important thing, right? Because there will be times when I think, and I don't want to speak on behalf of Generation 1, but I can a little bit in this sense. If you have a day when you come in and you're not involved in the fire because it's being handled, you can feel a little bit displaced. And so all you want is for somebody to bring you a fire. And people are more than happy to do that. Like, just create something that they know will just be the. So I think you have to be really careful not to fall into that trap.
Okay.
Hey, listen, if there's not a ton for you to do today, leave it too. Or, go
Take
have lunch. I don't know.
Don't create a problem for me here.
Right. But I think that can definitely be so people are coming to me and I'm handling everything and things are going pretty smooth. Are you okay with that?
Sure.
Because you're not needed as much, and you've been needed desperately for 40 years.
Right.
I mean, used to get the calls at midnight if
your
a machine went
identity
down.
And your ego and everything are tied up into that, right?
And I think how you have to be kind of self-aware to be able to face that. I mean, we all have egos, let's be honest.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
But some more than others, and I would say some company presidents more than others.
Yeah.
So I think people need to be aware that can be a pitfall.
Okay. Do you think there was a lot of cognizant things happening from Dick's standpoint to kind of make sure that, Lori is surrounded by talent that will still be here after I'm gone type of thing? Not in terms of gone, but in terms of that I'm not here anymore on a daily basis making decisions or sounds like he's the engineer. Are there some very qualified design folks that are here now that you can rely on?
Yeah. And I would say, again, I've been really fortunate to be part of recruiting and selecting most of that team.
Okay.
So, but over even the time that I've been here, I would say our senior management team has evolved to now it's my team.
Okay.
So there were some people that fell out of my team because they did not meet my expectation of a senior manager.
Okay.
They're still here and they might be in a valuable spot, but they weren't senior managers.
Okay.
They weren't looking at the strategic side of things. They weren't looking outside the business. They were,
Sure.
you know, hey, this is my job today and I'm going
Yeah,
to do it really
right.
well.
Right.
But we had to make those adjustments. And now I'm very confident because I look at my team and, you know, I've hired half of them and, you know,
Sure.
the rest are in the right spots.
I gotcha. Okay. All right. If we shift gears a little bit, you've got some kids of your own.
Yep.
When you were their age, you probably had no interest in ever coming back here, or is that too overstated?
No, you know what? I really didn't. I really saw myself living in somewhere like Chicago, you know, probably long term. I
Sure.
think that would have been the bigger shock if you asked me if I was going to live here. I'd be like, no, I'm not going to live there.
Yeah.
So I think what my kids have had is that they've had a lot more exposure to agri-industrial plastics as a player in the community. Okay. So, you know, just small things like, I mean, every other day, one of our 5 kids has on a sweatshirt or a hat that says agri-industrial plastics, right? Yep. Everybody associates them with agro, which I'm super proud of, and vice versa. They've all come through her on field trips since they were in 1st grade. Okay. So there's a lot more connection, I feel like, with them already, just in what we do and how we do it. Yep. So we have that. I also, my oldest daughter getting ready to graduate high school, going to into a business school. Also not you and I, but
she probably got denied.
we'll go with that. So I also don't want them to ever feel the pressure. Okay. My thing is, find something you're passionate about so you love what you do every day. Yep. I love what I do every day because of the people I work with.
Do you think that would be the case when you moved back from Chicago with your little kids? And
you know, like, I did because, you know what, I did. I mean, I was really optimistic. I definitely didn't come in with any like, oh my God, like, I don't think this is going to work. Okay. Not in the slightest. Okay. I was excited to be back. Very optimistic. For them. And so, yeah, I was pretty optimistic. Okay.
So have your kids pushed a broom in here, or have they done any of
the daughter that's just graduating is going to work reception this summer. Okay. So it's not quite as hard as cleaning the bathrooms in the plant. Sure.
You'll get her there. Huh?
Yeah, but and you know, we've got our son who's a junior in high school is interested in engineering. Okay. So certainly as he goes down that path, you know, we do a lot of engineering internships, so that would be a natural fit. And the nice thing is we're big enough that they don't have to work for me. Sure. Right? I mean, they can go work with somebody else.
Right. I don't need to see you at home and at the job.
Right. So
how do you handle that now with your father, as far as is he here a lot of times and you don't even know it, or not necessarily? I mean,
no, you know what? He's pretty consistent. You know, I'd say he comes in at 9 or 10 and he's here till about 2. We probably eat lunch together 2 to 3 days a week. Okay. And, you know, that's a good time outside of here where we can, you know, vent things and, or, you know, talk about things. Sure. So, no, he's pretty consistent. So I know he's here.
You're pretty, okay.
Some days more than others.
Okay. As far as like, you know, I mean, not that it's time for you to start planning your exit.
Oh, you sound like my attorney.
Good. But as far as, you know, thinking that way a little bit, and you've already mentioned a couple of times, it's important to start early. It's important to communicate openly and do those things. So, have you thought about, you know, how you're clearly scaling the company, bringing in a lot of outside talent and building up a big senior management team and can scale this thing even larger, I assume. And so have you thought about how you build the company for what you might want your exit plan to look like, or is it too early yet for that?
No, you know what? I don't think it's too early. I think that we have the benefit, having gone through it, to know a lot of the options, at least be semi-educated. Yep. You know, I know from a distance what it would take to do an ESOP. Yeah. I certainly wouldn't take that off the table for 3rd generation. I think it could get kind of murky. Now, I guess I'm fortunate in that my brother doesn't have kids either. So there's not really, I mean, there's that. Sure. But even with 5 kids, if we had multiple kids express interest, that could get a little dicey. My biggest, I guess my runway seems fairly long, because one thing I will not do is bring a kid back direct.
Okay.
So they need to go earn some significant stripes somewhere else.
Okay.
So they have something to bring to the table.
Was that one of the big keys for you to be successful
Absolutely.
here?
Absolutely. And I have told anyone who's ever asked me, like, hey, you know, my kid's in college, I'm thinking about, I'd be like, absolutely not. Make them go work somewhere. Because if you come back and only learn, you know, if I came back and only learned from Dick,
Yep.
I wouldn't be challenging whether or not we should have a computer or a typewriter.
You'd still be on
right?
typewriter
I'd still
over
be
there?
okay. I'd be like, oh, well, this is the way we've always done it.
Sure.
But when I came back, based on what I'd seen and knew and had experienced, I immediately knew we needed to do this, 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 and this. And so I am a just huge believer in you got to go do your own thing. And I don't even know how you would know whether or not you want to be here until you go do something else. So it can be in the same
Sure.
line, right? Like I was an accountant wherever I went, and
Yeah.
but I did strategic planning, which I didn't know anything about.
Yeah.
That was a huge asset to me coming back here.
So part of that was being at a bigger company too.
And you know what? I would say that there's definitely some value there. Smaller companies can be great because you can do a lot of different things.
Sure.
Bigger companies, I mean, you look at a GE pedigree, tough to beat. I
Yeah.
mean, the training they go through, and the other background, I would just put way at the top, military. I
Okay.
mean, the skills learned, and that's on the employees that we hire side as well.
Sure.
But the skill sets that they come in here with, I mean, it sets them up for a great career and a great path. So again, I feel like I've got a little bit of a runway based on my requirements.
Yeah.
That, nobody's coming in here day one after graduation.
They're
And
clearly
not that they're not bright and they're
Sure.
great kids, but
okay.
I'll be calling my ABI buddies and sending their resumes to those companies.
Any other, from that, knowing yourself and maybe how it was for you as Generation 2 coming in, and sometimes we have that, silver spoon Steve mentality, or the outside world can be cruel a little bit. I don't know, maybe not, but there's certainly stereotypes. And how have you, if we've got some Generation 2 folks on the call or potential Generation 2 folks, do you have any advice there? I'm sure part of it is go and have a life before you come back, or prove yourself somewhere else. Are there some other things?
Yeah, well, I mean, one thing I would say is respect the legacy. Don't come in and turn everything on a dime day one. So what I didn't say about my past company, it was a $4 billion publicly traded company in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
The founder was mid-50s, got colon cancer, and died in a very short time. He was beloved by all 3,500 of us. Great guy, garage, worked for IBM, and then turned it into this big company.
Okay.
His Wall Street son came in, having had nothing to do with business, turned it on a dime, started running ads at a Super Bowl. I mean, just ridiculous things. Company went bankrupt within 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so all my stock options at the end of my 10 years, it didn't do well. Yeah.
Okay.
So in all honesty, that sounds easy, but respecting the legacy should be a cornerstone.
How do you get kind of to, is it pretty easy to know this is the legacy and this is the way it would have been done had Generation 1 been making this decision?
I think that
the hard way?
If you're making the choice to come back, and I'm assuming that Generation 1 is still there,
Mm-hmm.
one, you know it from the outside world, right? You've lived with this person being your father or whatever, mother, whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you already have a sense of legacy. I knew what, like, community stuff. I knew what he was to the company. I knew his background. I knew things.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have that going in, like if you already have some tensions and you haven't worked together, I wouldn't do it.
Okay.
I mean, that's just,
Sure.
I think you really have to have that respect. And then you need to really respect, you might do, like I didn't necessarily do things the same way as the woman who had scheduled production for the first 30 years of the company.
Yeah.
She had a lot of yellow pads, but
Okay.
you know what? She was really good at what she did.
Sure.
And had I come in and just disrespected her and said, well, that's stupid, that's not going to go a long way.
Right.
So I think you also have to come in, listen before you speak. People don't need to hear how smart you are. They need to, again, know you care, know that you're not going to turn their world upside down, And for us in manufacturing, it's really about, you better be out on the floor. If you think you can sit in an office with your silver spoon and your BMW, and all those things are fine. I mean, listen, I'd love to have a BMW instead of a Bronco when I got back, but that's not a bad thing. But how you carry yourself at the company should not be defined by the fact you drive a BMW.
Okay.
And again, for me, it's about,
you better get in there early, that kind of thing. And...
Oh, absolutely. I mean, again, you got to earn your own stripes.
All right.
You're not going to get your G1's credibility by just sharing the bloodline.
Sure.
That's going to last about
2 days.
A day.
Yeah.
If that.
Yeah.
In fact, I would say you're at a negative when you walk in, because what's the assumption?
Sure.
Well, she obviously couldn't get a job anywhere
Right,
else, and now she's working here. I don't know.
Miss Unemployed walking through
Right.
the door,
I mean, so I think that you really need to be aware coming in. You need to listen and learn, not just jump in and tell everybody how smart you are and make a bunch of changes. And
okay. Do you think that working somewhere else for a while where you get exposures and maybe you do fall flat a little bit at times, or speak out of turn, or you learn some things there? Okay,
sure.
I shouldn't have done it that way, and glad I didn't have to learn that lesson at Agra type of thing, and I could learn it there instead.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, in part, you're going to grow up, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Hopefully.
if you work somewhere for 10 years.
My mom is still hoping, but yeah.
I mean, those are pretty formative years. I mean, 21 to, 30, you hope you're growing up, and being exposed to a lot of different people and, understanding basic concepts of business.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and again, for me, it was like living the worst succession plan in the world and knowing, what not to do. Sure. Sadly, that was a pretty extreme way to learn that.
Someone else's dime a little bit.
You don't want to do that, but.
Okay. As we're kind of wrapping up here, any other advice? And also, I'll make a mention, if anyone has questions, please, let us get those right now. We've got just a couple minutes left, but if you've got questions, feed those into us. Otherwise, Lori, do you have another kind of advice, or, if there was a younger you in the room, things that you would share with her?
That would be great. That would be awesome. Again, I go back to some of the things we've already talked about. Pick good advisors. At the end of the day, the question that, as much as a million times a day, I say, what's the best thing for Agra? Because we've got a lot of lives depending on that. So it's not about really what's the best thing for me or even for Dick. It was about what's the best thing for Agra? Mm-hmm. How do we keep this thing going successfully? And I think that if you can let questions like that guide you, you'll be in a pretty good place.
Sure.
Again, seek out advice. You don't have to go this alone. You don't need to recreate the wheel. A lot of smart people have been through it a million times before. Utilize those people. But the other thing that really drives me is that being president of Agri-Industrial Plastics, not as important as being part of the Smith family. So and look, I'll get teary when I say this,
okay,
but I would give up my job before I gave up my relationship with my family. And remember that it's not just about you and the person at work. You impact, your mom and your brother and Thanksgiving, and I mean, a whole host of things. So nothing, in my opinion, in my life is worth that being strained or tension filled. So that family, keeping that family intact is really important. And at the very beginning, we had to have, when we would go to the lake house, Dick would want to talk about business. And there was a couple times, and I was with my kids and they were little, and I had to just stop and say, you know what, if we need to talk about this, we have to set up a time. Because I'm here as daughter and mom, and, I've got kids screaming. And so we had to establish a couple rules.
Those lines can blur quickly.
Yeah, about, listen, we spend enough time on Agra. Let's, table that and talk about it later.
Yeah.
So, but if people go in with those honest, goals, you should be okay.
Okay.
But there's a few pitfalls around,
Sure.
So.
Like anything, it's life.
Anything, it's life.
All right. Well, it's 1:00, and that's when we try to wrap up. I'll just check here. I don't think we have any new questions. We appreciate your time being on with us today. mostly we appreciate Lori's time being able to do this,
Sure.
open up a little bit about your own family transition. And as we've said before, I was filled with generational companies, and it's always great to be able to talk to a generational company about how they've gone through something successfully. So thank you for your time today,
You're
Lori.
welcome.
Thank you all for joining us. And we're going to take a little hiatus for the summer. We'll be back later this fall, where we'll be talking a little bit more about increasing the value of your company. So a lot of times we work with companies who have these maybe outsized assumptions of what their company is worth, 3, 4, 5 million, and some quick rule of thumb valuation pegs things more at 1 or 2 million. And how do we increase the value of our companies to get to more of what we want out of them? And so we'll be talking about that. So thank you all for joining us. Have a great summer, and see you next time. Thanks.